appreciate your putting your graphs through, and we love you for putting those graphs that you put through. And we would have loved to hear this debate later in the evening also. It would have been really interesting. I just want to put a small anecdote, and I just want you to tell us where exactly history will slot America. We belong to that generation, and when I started emceeing this whole conclave, I said this: we belong perhaps to the last generation of kids who used to wait for their uncles to come back from America and bring goodies, electronic items, and gadgetry. It is fascinating, more than these graphs, to see those same cousins, those kids of those uncles, wanting to pack their bags and come back to India, and they are envious of us instead of us being envious of them that we were 10, 15 years ago. What went wrong? Did the US slip? Did the empire slip? Or we are the ones who are getting the things right? Are they getting it wrong, or are we getting it right? Who will and where will America be slotted by historians?
Thanks, that's a great question. I'll give a brief answer to allow as much time as possible for discussion. Incidentally, I hope I'm not going to be blamed for the curtailment of the discussion period, but we did start fantastically late.
Yeah,
the answer is both. The United States certainly began to get things wrong as it shifted increasingly to a debt-propelled consumption model rather than an investment and innovate model. And the extent to which GDP growth in the United States over the 10 years or so up to the financial crisis was debt-propelled rather than innovation-propelled is truly amazing. If you strip out mortgage refinancing, the real underlying rate of growth in the US in the Bush years was probably 1%. So that's part of the story. But I think the more important part is that, that India got it right, finally, and very belatedly. And this transformation of India's economic fortunes is one of the most exciting things I've ever witnessed. I first came to this country in the early 1980s, and I can remember going to Calcutta and thinking I had encountered a totally ossified society that was genuinely institutionally incapable of modernizing itself economically. And now when I come, I'm startled all the time by the change I've seen since my last visit, which was just over a year ago when I went to Jaipur, to that wonderful literary festival they have there. India is an astonishing story, and it's one about which I remain fundamentally optimistic. I ended on a slightly ambivalent note by suggesting that Congress, the US Congress, was becoming a little bit like Congress, the Indian Congress. But I also mean that in a good sense. It's a huge advantage to India to have the institutions of representative government and to have a free press. Having freedom is a hugely valuable thing for a society that wants to be innovative. And it's the thing you have that the Chinese don't have, among other things. If I had to take a bet about where things will go over the next 20 or 30 years, in fact, my money would be more on India than on China, because I think grappling with the lack of free institutions in China is going to be a huge problem in that country for the coming generation of leaders.
My name is Sheree Robinson, and I'm an American here to first interesting note that there's no American on the panel to talk about America's decline. But my question is more broad.
She's coming.
My question really relates to the fact that many of the countries that are now seeing economic growth did so on the back of American ideas and opportunities afforded to people from other countries in the United States. And as America continues to decline, in your words, who is going to be that beacon of opportunity after all the countries kind of level out? Since many countries like China, who are rising, are doing so at the oppression of many of the people in their land.
Thanks, that's a great question. And I want to underscore here that my sense of what is wrong with the United States is that it is primarily political. The principal problems are solvable if the political will can be found. Because right at the core, American society is still the most dynamic and vital society out there. It's still the best country in the world to come, get an education at a top-flight institution, have a great idea, and turn it into a company. You know, you just can't imagine Mark Zuckerberg doing that sort of thing at the University of Peking. And that's really the key point. If American government can clean up its act with radical fiscal reform and the kind of tax reform that would so simplify life for ordinary entrepreneurs, I think the Americans can pull it off again in the 21st century. And you make a really valid point here. Going back to the very first question, the uncles who went to the United States gave back to India at least some of what they learned there, and in some cases a lot of what they learned there. Just as much of the expertise that kick-started China's economic miracle was expertise learnt in the United States or imported from the United States through foreign direct investment. And this goes right back to MJ's point about liberal empire. If you believe in spreading the wonder of free markets and a free society, the downside is that if you succeed, then these other more populous societies may catch up with you. And so victory is a kind of defeat.
Yep.
I think that is the central paradox of the American predicament.
Neil, perish the thought that you're a left-oriented Oxbridge person. Only HBS Don could have written such a sweepingly brilliant book as Civilization. Question, you've never mentioned in the book about any killer apps that India or China have, but you've yet said that Japan and China have imitated or emulated the killer apps of the US. If they indeed have done so, then it's as much the West's triumph as it is its failure.
Yeah.
The fact that their killer apps have been imitated by Japan and China points to the triumph of the West as much as its failure. It just doesn't show that they are different anymore.
I think that's a great point and a wonderful note on which to conclude. I guess the fact that you are an MBA HBS graduate might explain why we're about to agree so completely. But even if you were from Yale or some other inferior institution, I would still agree. The bottom line is this. We will know, and I think it will be in our lifetime, whether China can pull off the trick of selectively downloading the killer apps that it likes, but not the crucial one of political freedom. If they pull that off and sustain their economic model without freedom, without free speech, without free politics, without all the kinds of things that make Indian life both vital and messy, then I'll have to accept they didn't really westernize. They basically kept at least one Oriental killer app, the killer app of a highly centralized authoritarian state. But I'm in that sense an optimist. I think ultimately there is an incompatibility between a free economy and an unfree society. And that is why, to conclude on a very uplifting note, that is why my money is not only on the United States to rally if it can sort its political problems out, and who knows, perhaps we'll hear them solved tonight, but also on India, because I think India has downloaded all the killer applications, of which the most important must be freedom. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Well spoken.